Hello everyone, welcome to this conversation about MOCRA. In December of last year, the United States enacted a new cosmetics regulation, the Modernization of Cosmetics Regulation Act of 2022, MOCRA, and everyone in the industry is talking about that. So today we have here Geoff Waby, board directors of Obelis USA, that will tell us a bit more about MOCRA.
Yeah, so MOCRA is a huge change for the US cosmetics market. Obelis, for the last 35 years, has been helping companies around the world to comply with regulations in many major markets. And with the passing of MOCRA, we bring the same expertise to the compliance with the regulations in the cosmetics market in the US. So it's a huge change. We're looking forward to helping existing clients with regulations in the US and welcoming new clients to Obelis, where we can support them not just in the US, but also in the EU, UK, Switzerland, and other international markets.
Thank you for being here. MOCRA is setting new requirements for cosmetic brands, and not only, because also facilities, but the majority of our clients are dealing with the European Union market. So first I wanted you to let us know a little bit about the terminology MOCRA uses, because, for example, it mentions the responsible person that we know from the EU cosmetics regulation, but how is it different in the United States?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about how it works in the US. And then if you can highlight then the differences, because there is at least one major difference in the European market. And you need complete clarity on that difference because it leads you down certain paths, which if you just think of it as following how Europe goes, then it can leave you with some confusion about how the US is organized. So first of all, the important thing about the US is they define two groups of people. So there is the owners of facilities that manufacture or process cosmetic products for the US market. So I would describe those as contract manufacturers, the people who make the product that goes on the skin or in the mouth and put it into the primary package, the bottle or the tube. MOCRA applies to those people. So further downstream, the people who are bundling those into promotional packs, doing secondary packaging, are not the target of MOCRA. So MOCRA is all about minimizing the risk to public health in the US, and it's the product that goes onto the skin or in the mouth that is the direct component of the product which has an impact on public health, and then the primary package, because the materials that you choose, the interaction between the materials and the product can have an effect on the product itself. So it focuses on the manufacturers who are making or processing cosmetics. First of all, they have to get an FDA Establishment Identifier number, an FEI number. Anyone who's selling products or manufacturing products for sale in the US market today, wherever they are in the world, has to have an FEI number. If they're supplying OTC drugs to that market, they already have an FEI number. So it's been a requirement for a number of years. You will have an FEI number if you're supplying OTC drugs. You will use the same FEI number for registering yourself as a cosmetics manufacturer. So that's the first step. There's a portal within the FDA, and you go and get yourself a number, and then you provide that number to the brand owner, the responsible person. So that brings me to the responsible person. They are that is identified as the company who owns the brand that the product is sold under. So typically that is the brand owner. In certain cases, it could be the distributor of the product. So whoever identifies themselves on the package as the owner of that brand and the company placing that product on the US market. So that's one of the important pieces of terminology to begin with, because that responsible person, as the brand owner, has a number of functions, which we'll get into in a little bit more detail. Safety substantiation, adverse event reporting, listing their products with the FDA. And that's probably one of the main differences between US and Europe, because I think in Europe it means something, they use the same terminology, but it means something slightly different.
Yes,
Francesca,
exactly. In Europe, the responsible person is the brand owner that sells the products under its trade name or trade name. And so for European Union for brands based in European Union, they can be their own responsible person, while brands based outside EU must appoint another entity, must designate with a written mandate another entity as responsible person, which is generally by law the importer, but they can also designate someone else, like Obelis, so a professional responsible person, who take over all the responsibilities and the accountability of the responsible person. But in the United States, it's different.
That's right. So the responsible person, it's the brand owner under MOCRA, or as I say, could be the distributor if they identify themselves on the packaging as owning this brand. They cannot delegate the responsible person name, so they will remain legally accountable for all of the activities that a responsible person must fulfill. But they can, of course, engage Obelis to execute those things on their behalf. So each one of those items I've already touched on, listing the products in the US market, Obelis can do that on behalf of the brand owner. Safety substantiation, Obelis can help hold on to the safety substantiation. We can also create that, work with toxicologists, safety assessors to create the safety substantiation and hold on to that safety substantiation on behalf of the brand owner, in case the FDA want to see it, want to examine it and confirm the safety of the product. Adverse event reporting, again, we can, as Obelis, we can have our US name and address, contact details on the packaging, so that adverse events, if someone gets an irritation, a redness of the skin, hair fallout when using the product, then under MOCRA, there must be someone they can turn to lodge that. And it says that someone must either have a US domestic address and phone number or an electronic contact details. So again, we can accept those on behalf of the responsible person, communicate with the responsible person, tell them, look, you're getting, you've had 4 examples in the last month or so, all of irritation, 3 on the neck and 1 in the eye. Is that, do you want to add additional warning labels to the packaging? Would you even want to go as far as reformulating, adjusting the formula? Or is it the level of irritation that you might expect in a very small number of the population as a percentage that purchase the product? So that activity we can do on behalf of responsible persons. The important thing I want to emphasize is that under MOCRA, the brand owner remains accountable for that, and we become a support, assistance, executing all of those activities to keep the brand owners under control, are in compliance with the regulations.
I think the possibility to delegate the execution of such activities to someone else is extremely important, especially for small brands which maybe don't have a regulatory team within the company. So I think there's a lot of new requirements that companies has to follow, and appointing someone else with experience, professional experience in the field can be a good way to tackle the new challenges that MOCRA is posing to the industry.
I mean, I think it's essential because, again, if you think of a relatively small company, often they don't have the regulatory people who are experienced in compliance, in handling incoming complaints. And the FDA have been given, so MOCRA was passed by Congress, and Congress gave certain powers to the FDA. And among those powers are the right to examine records of adverse event reporting. And the FDA, it's a public health. They're there to protect the public health, and that's their absolute function in life. They take the oath to protect public health extremely seriously. And so they have been given the right to examine the records to make sure that companies do have the feedback from their clients. So the companies know if they are causing slight irritation. And as I say, some of this irritation can be expected with some ingredients of cosmetic products. But the FDA it's a very high priority. If I think of OTC drugs and inspections the FDA does on OTC drugs, one of their top priorities is, when your product is used in the market, do you know what the experience is of your consumers? Are some of them experiencing adverse experiences with those products? Are they feeding them back to you? Are you taking them seriously? Are you looking at the picture overall and acting as a responsible custodian of your brand and its impact on the public health to make whatever changes you may consider in terms of labeling, warning letter, usage instructions, formulation, etc., to make sure your product it does minimum harm, does maximum benefit, and continues to attract healthy sales and grow as a brand, which is what you obviously want to do. So smaller companies are likely not to have this level of expertise, not to have on the ground a representation in the US, and so Obelis USA is perfectly placed with the expertise, the experience. 35 years of helping companies be compliant in Europe means that we're very, very familiar with safety substantiation, what that means in Europe, and I'm sure that's a topic that we'll touch on. And so we're perfectly placed to keep you in compliance with the new regulations without you having to invest in your own regulatory people and your own expertise. We can do that on your behalf.
Thank you, Geoff. You were also mentioning facilities and contract manufacturers. And now I would like to kindly ask you to tell us a bit more about the US agent, because it's something that in Europe we don't know. There's nothing compared to this in the European cosmetics regulation.
Yeah. So, US agent. So in MOCRA, anybody manufacturing or processing in a facility which is not in the United States must appoint a US agent. So in OTC drugs, again, similar situation, but now for cosmetics, and we're talking about many, many facilities all around the world. Anyone who's manufacturing or processing a product which ends up on the US cosmetics market, if they're not in the US, they have to appoint a US agent. And that's simply because the FDA, as a US public health protector, needs somebody in the USA who they can get hold of and promptly, easily, reliably. If, for example, a consumer comes in and not just tells the company that they've had an adverse event, but goes to the FDA with an adverse event. And some of the reasons that MOCRA came about in the United States is there have been examples of products which have caused some distress and some harm to consumers around the US market. So consumers, again, thinking of the OTC drug market as a model, consumers in the US are used to going to the FDA and then telling them about adverse events they're having. So FDA, instead of then they'll have the records. So contract manufacturers all have to register their facility with the US, so they will know where that manufacturer is located. They'll have a registration number, but in that registration process, they have to nominate an agent as well. So there is a local US-based agent like Obelis where the FDA can go to and make sure they've got reliable communications to sort out and investigate any problem that there might be. And the FDA, as part of MOCRA, has been given some very wide-ranging abilities through MOCRA, so they are able to mandate a withdrawal of products. So let me say, first of all, cosmetics is a very safe market. So compared to foods, compared to drugs, cosmetics have an extremely strong safety record. So the number of times this happens, I would expect to be very, very low. But if it does happen, they have the ability to mandate a recall from the market. They also have the ability to remove the registration. So the facility, a registration number, they can remove that from a manufacturer, and that then prevents them shipping these products into the US market. So nobody wants to trigger that kind of thing happening, because then everyone is losing business on that account. So they have some very strong tools in their toolbox to make sure that people are compliant. And one of them is the US agent, which is a requirement for any manufacturing or processing location outside of the US.
So thank you for clarifying these terms, because it's important to understand the different roles, the responsible person and the US agent. So coming to the other requirements MOCRA is establishing, we know, for example, that in the European Union, to sell a cosmetic product, you have to first appoint a responsible person, then you have to collect the product information file documentation, including the safety assessment report, and then your responsible person will notify your product on the CPMP. So this online portal where you can notify your products, and through the notification you will be able to enter all countries, provided that you translate the labels into the national languages. So MOCRA is setting new requirements such as the product listing, as you mentioned, the facility registration, but also the fact that companies must hold the dossier substantiating the safety of a cosmetic product. What does it mean exactly?
Yeah, and substantiation is not easy to say. I struggle with that frequently. So first of all, the CPNP. So you're right. The CPNP in Europe, where you input your information into the government system, that is the product listing. So that those two are equivalent. Safety substantiation is a separate. I mean, it's best to think of it as a separate line. And I know in Europe you linked them, and quite rightly you linked them in Europe. In the US, it's two separate activities. And the reason I say that is because product listing has to go into the portal. So you go on the FDA website and put all of that data in, like CPNP. The safety substantiation is something you hold. So you don't have to register or lodge that with them or register with them. And you don't even have to tell them you've got it, because you've always had a responsibility on the US market, and I'm sure every other market, to market safe products. So that's a fundamental responsibility which has always been there for anyone placing a cosmetic product onto the US market. With MOCRA, they've added some more detail to that. They've added less detail than Europe, so they are far less definitive than Europe in terms of what goes into safety substantiation. But the language they've used is so first of all, you have to have studies, reports, toxicological assessments, all of those things. And I'm paraphrasing from MOCRA, such that an expert trained and qualified to assess that type of information for cosmetic products could reasonably conclude that the product is safe. So it's a nice legal language to say, much like Europe, you need a good, responsible toxicologist, and you also need a good, responsible company management who wants to be sure that they've done all of the studies, got all of the data, and made sure, satisfied themselves that the product is safe. Because as I've pointed out, the responsible person is the one under MOCRA ultimately accountable to the law to make sure the product is safe and to have that safety substantiation. So many companies will have global formulations. So they'll have formulated their product so it is suitable for the world's markets. It will likely also be on the EU market, so they will have the things you've talked about, the product information file, the cosmetic product safety report, and provided the the US formulation is sufficiently similar to the European formulation, or if it's a global formulation, so that all of the work of the European CPSR is equally applicable to the US CPSR, then that will suffice for safety substantiation. And I say that because industry in general will be presenting FDA with EU type documents on global formulations to justify safety substantiation. But also, we're members of the Personal Care Products Council, the Industry Association for Large Companies in the US, Independent Beauty Association, the Industry Association for small and medium-sized companies in the US. And there's recently been a workshop where these questions get addressed to the FDA. And so they were asked, would you expect, if somebody presents you with a European-style dossier, would you expect that to be acceptable? And the head of the cosmetics office responded, if that were the case, we would expect that to be acceptable, which is as close as you'll get to a yes. And so, yes, I would expect over the years, they will be shown European style documentation, and that will become adopted. I would believe it will always be accepted. I'd be surprised if FDA come out definitively and say, this part of the European requirement is not acceptable to us. They may come out, so they do have models. So they've got a Red Book process which applies to foods. So they do have their own models and in their mind and documented for other product categories. So there may come a time where they wish to shift the industry towards different models, but I'd be very surprised if they come out and say, look, the European is unacceptable. Over the years, they may wish to modify it slightly. And that will be true in any regulatory body. That as people learn new things, then they may introduce new changes. But anyway, for the moment, I would fully expect the European model to work in the US.
Okay. So, because in Europe, the model we have is precise, defining the law, the elements that it must contain. So it's very clear for cosmetic brands what to include in this safety substantiation document. But from what you tell us, in the United States, there's a more like open definition, but we can tell that the EU safety assessment will be accepted, is generally accepted.
Yeah, I mean, it's accepted it's recognized as being an excellent piece of work in regulatory regimes around the world. And I would expect the US to fall into line on that and say, yes, this is the kind of documentation we want to accept. And one of the other things that they say, FDA say, I think understandably, is we don't pretend to know as much about as industry does about the products, the formulation, the usage instructions, the dosing quantities, the exposure level, the combination. Cosmetics are used in combination, as you know. So it's industry's role. Industry have all of the information in their hands. It is up to industry to sit and give it serious scientific thought with the help of certified toxicologists to do the study and sign off on the safety. And then if that ever comes up as a question, then industry or individual companies will have to present and justify their arguments for why the product is safe.
Thank you, Geoff. So we have tackled the requirements that will apply as of December 29 of this year, which are the product listing, the facilities registration, the safety dossier, adverse event recording, and serious adverse event reporting to the FDA. But there are also some requirements that will apply a bit later. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. So a couple of things that FDA are required to do by MOCRA is, in the middle of 2024, is to produce a list of fragrance allergens. And again, that's something we're very familiar with on European products. And FDA is now falling into line and issuing their own list of fragrance allergens or potential fragrance allergens. Will it be the same list as the EU? Don't know. Will it be very similar? Don't know. None of us know. But they have a requirement to generate the list and notify industry for the US market of which ones are potential fragrance allergens. And then if you have one of those fragrance allergens on your potential fragrance allergens on your product, you're required to list it on the label. And another aspect of FDA's abilities to look at records is if they think a serious adverse event, and serious adverse events are those things which cause a major adverse, so hospitalizations, serious medical, persistent medical problems. If they think those are potentially caused by fragrance allergens, then they have the right to look at the records for that and really investigate with companies and to be provided with the information so they can investigate and see whether they believe those fragrance allergens are causing some of the problems. So yes, fragrance allergens middle of next year, and then also during next year, so at least before the end of next year, they have to come up with a draft set of good manufacturing practice regulations. And by the end of 2025, they have to finalize those. So they will issue their draft in next year. There will be a comment period. They've taken on board the comments, and then they finalize them the following year, 2025. It's going to be interesting. Industry around the world follows ISO 22716. FDA have held listening sessions where stakeholders, industry, retailers, had an opportunity to give them input. They had a lot of input that they should apply the ISO regulation because it's recognized around the world. The whole infrastructure is there for becoming compliant, assessing compliance, and so on. But until now, they have created their own GMP guidelines. So if I look at OTC drugs as a model, they have their own. If I look at the draft cosmetic guidelines that they produced, FDA issued back in 2013, it was after ISO was established in 2007. And what they read the ISO, they looked at ISO, built in many aspects of ISO, but still issued their own set of GMP regulations. So it will be very interesting to see, and all will be revealed next year. But once that happens, then again, that's another major step up in FDA oversight, because that then gives them inspection rights. FDA will then have inspection rights to come into all the facilities all around the world to inspect them versus whatever good manufacturing practice requirements they pass into the regulations, and to ensure that everyone is in control of their manufacturing and producing safe products, consistent products, effective products, and making sure that the products are not adulterated either microbially or with what's commonly termed filth, so anything that shouldn't be in there, or misbranded by, for example, incorrect labeling, wrong material in the product. So those are the two headings that they classify their observations under. If you haven't produced exactly the right product with exactly the right packaging, then in one way or another, it can be adulterated or it could be misbranded. And again, they have got all of the mandatory recall powers, all of the powers to remove the registration from a manufacturing facility and prevent that from happening, from shipping products into the US. And the US is a market where cross-border shipments, obviously they all come in through borders, and the FDA is very active in holding imported products and waiting and looking for and ensuring that all of the paperwork and documentation is in line before allowing it to be placed on the US market.
It will be very interesting to see what will happen in the next years. And the labeling, individual labeling of fragrance allergens is a hot topic also in Europe, because for a long time in Europe we had a list of 26 allergens to labels if they exceed certain concentration. But this summer the European Commission issued a new regulation adding to this list many more allergens. So now the industry has time like 3 years for new products and 5 years for products already placed on the market to relabel them. So to retest according to the new allergens list and to label them in case they found these allergens. So this is something that both in the United States and the European Union, the industry will have to keep an eye on.
Yes, yeah. I mean, there's no doubt it's a real revolution for cosmetics market in the US, and it's really bringing them into line with other major markets such as the EU. So exciting times, and this is where all the manufacturing facilities and all the brand owners all around the world need to take advantage of experienced people like Obelis, which has a 35-year history of doing this for the EU, to take advantage of that knowledge and expertise to apply it to the US market and keep growing their business. It's a very attractive business. Cosmetics it's a wonderful business. It's about health, well-being, and self-image. It's an important business, it's a growing business, and it's there for public health in general, because mental health and mental well-being is a very important topic. Cosmetics can contribute to that significantly, and all of the companies that provide that market need to ensure that they're not inadvertently causing harm by skin rashes, irritations, significant hair fallout, or whatever. So it's a big deal, and it's been a pleasure to talk with you about it and examine some of the differences between the US and the EU, Francesca.
Thank you, Geoff. It's always a pleasure talking with you, and see you next time with more insights on MOCRA.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.